Hey folks, first let me say I hope you're all doing well. I'm thinking about you, worrying about you, and I really miss meeting with you in person, but here we are. So if you have questions about anything, please do reach out to me. I'm always happy to get your questions. If you have any concerns, if you're struggling with anything, reach out to me. I'm here for you on that. Also, the GTA, Emily, and the UTAs, Shireen and Mary, are both available to you. So check their contact information on the Blackboard page and reach out, okay? Please. And take good care of yourselves. Stay safe. Don't get sick. Good times, okay? So I'm going to go over the incorporating sources stuff with you. This is pretty important for writing. This is college level writing, it's more advanced level writing. This is definitely one of those things that less important early on in your education, but as a college graduate, you're going to need to know how to really effectively incorporate sources. So that said, let us head through this PowerPoint presentation because life is PowerPoint. So why do we care about incorporating sources? Credibility, obviously, this is part of your ethos, part of you saying not just I know how to handle sources responsibly and how to evaluate them. It's also saying this material I'm writing about is based on sources and they're good ones. Okay, so very key. It'll enhance your paper. Again, more of the same about ethos. Really key component of a high quality paper. Obviously, you want to make sure you're not plagiarizing. We talked about that earlier in the semester. There should be some material on Blackboard about that. If I'm talking about anything we've already discussed and you don't remember it, just drop me an email. I'll make sure the material is up on Blackboard. It does help maintain the flow of the paper. I have seen a few claims, for example, already that haven't had great flow because there haven't been enough transitions. So transitions are key, but also identifying your sources is all part of that, really effective. You don't want your reader to stop and say, hang on, where does that come from? You should be telling them before they even have to think about it, okay? All right, so we're going to look at APA and MLA really briefly because this stuff is stupidly complicated. Simply put, in APA style, if you're going to talk about the source in the text, you're just going to name all of the last names only of the authors up until you get to at least 6. Once you have 6 or more authors, you go with the first last name. You can see that down here, Crawford et al., and then always in APA, the year in parentheses right after it. Also, please remember that all has a period after it. This is stupid, but it's an abbreviation for alia, which is and others. Okay, good times. On the second reference, the second time you're referring to the source in your paper, once you get to, this is the only difference in bold, once you get to between 3 and 5 authors, you can go to last name et al. So that's nice because it's unwieldy if you have 5 authors that you're citing over and over again. So I think that's pretty nice. And the same goes when you're just citing them in parentheses at the end of a quotation or the end of a reference, okay? In MLA style, they actually simplified pretty dramatically a couple of years ago. For 1 and 2 authors, you're going to have first and last name. And then I know that CJ Cherry is abbreviated, but that's just because that's how she's known as an author. You're going to spell out the first names, and then anytime you hit 3 authors or more, it's always going to be first author et al. Okay? So background. You're fairly rarely going to indicate the author's background, and I used to have students overdoing it with the background. If there's some really relevant background, then you might reference it in the text. So this first one, Alan Greenspan was the chair of the Federal Reserve for many, many years under many presidents. Very highly regarded person, okay? So if you were citing Alan Greenspan, you would want to say he was the former Federal Reserve chair. These others are actually specifically UTAs from this semester or past semesters. But if your source has won a Nobel Prize in chemistry and they're talking about chemistry, that's relevant. Shireen was, we're pretending, a former elementary school teacher who now leads the Flat Earth Society, We would probably not particularly respect her if that was the case, but I can promise you that she does not. And then Emma Clark, if she has some specific thing that she's constantly worked on, there's a wonderful psychologist named James Pennebaker who's done a lot of, much of his career has been around writing and psychology, writing and mental health, wonderful work. And so I think in my dissertation, I sort of referenced that he's spent his career focusing on that, and that would be a really relevant thing too. It wasn't just some dude did this one study. It is this man has dedicated his career to a given topic, and therefore his credibility is going to be higher. It might be useful, but the vast majority of your sources, you won't need to do that, and for some of you, you won't bother doing that at all, and that's fine. I just want you to know that this is one approach, okay? Okay. So, using quotations. Anytime you're using the exact wording, you guys know this. If it's not in quotation marks, and cited both, then you're plagiarizing. So you got to be really careful about that. So please put some effort into that, and then you'll want to use them sparingly. So no more than 10% of your paper. I will note that there are some fields where like I think bio and, or not, sorry, not bio, psych and sociology don't like quotation all that much. I think that's nutty, but you'll want to pay attention in your later classes to see what your professors want you to do. But just a heads up. And then the quotations themselves have to flow well within the paper. So sometimes there will be like an introduction to the quotation and the quotation, and they don't make sense together. So when that happens, you either need to change how you're introducing it, or sometimes you use less of the quotation, or sometimes you just don't use the quotation and you paraphrase. Those things are all fine. You just have to make sure that it makes sense logically within the quotation, within the context in which you're using it, okay? And VCU Writes is a good source for that. There are sections on how to use quotations, so check those out if you're unsure. Okay. Quotes can't stand alone. You shouldn't be starting or ending paragraphs with them. You don't just plop it in there. You're going to need to make each quote a part of your essay. You want to, and when I say introduce it, you provide some sort of argument. You use the quotation to support your argument or to illustrate your argument. You might do some analysis and then transition to your next topic. And you could have 2 or 3 quotations from different sources in a given paragraph, but it all has to really flow together, and it has to be clear to the reader why they're there and what they're doing. Okay? All right, and don't rephrase or summarize the quotation. Yes, don't repeat. So that's something I've seen people do as well. Students do is they have the quotation, and then they're telling me what the quotation says, but I can read that quotation. You don't need to do that. Okay, so with MLA, just want to point out, this is some logistical stuff. If you're going to note the name of the author in the text, then you don't also note the author. This is true for APA as well. You don't also note the author in the in-text citation. But the citation still has to be there if there's a page number. If it's an online source and there's no page number, you might not have a citation at all. But I always need to be able to go into your citation page, your either if it's MLA Works Cited or if it's APA References, and I need to be able to find that source. Some of you may have multiple sources by the same author. Check, it's not super common, so I'm not talking about it in this presentation, but check VCU Writes for explanations on how to handle that. Whoops, pardon me. Okay, and so if you're not using the author in the text, then write down here in the in-text citation. And you'll see with MLA, just last name, space, page number, nothing else. It's very, very simple. It's kind of nice. With APA, very often you'll mention the author in text, last name, and then the year is always in parentheses. Okay, then you have your quotation, P period, and page number. The reason they use P period in APA is that sometimes the page numbers are really long and they want to make sure you're not mistaking a page number for a year. And yep, same thing. Okay, APA, here again you have the entire bit of information in the citation. last name, comma, year, comma, P period, and page number. Okay? Not coronavirus, I promise. Okay. So in the middle of the sentence, if you have a quotation, you're going to stick that citation right after the quotation and then finish the sentence, unless the entire sentence, if this, for example, is taken from the source rather than commentary on the source, then you would put the citation at the end of that. Okay, but remember, you still have to cite stuff, not just quotations, but also material that you took from that source, even paraphrased. Okay, there we go. That's how that looks. You'll have access to rewatch this 20 million times if you want to, although please don't. That might impact your mental health. Okay. Block quotations are used when there's a significant chunk of material. It's more than 4 lines for MLA. It's more than 40 words, I think, for APA, but that's kind of stupid because you don't want to sit there and count words, right? So just say about anything over about 4 lines, you're going to use what's called a block quotation, a block quote. Okay, and so here, here's what that should look like. Okay, they start on their own line. The entire block quotation is indented 0.5 inches. If you're not sure how to do that, it's pretty easy to just Google it, regardless of what you're using to write your paper in. Right, okay, and keep it double spaced. Sometimes people are unsure about that. You're not going to use quotation marks, which I know looks kind of weird, feels kind of weird to do it. And then you're going to have a period and then your citation. So the period usually is going to be after the citation. For a block quote, it's before the citation. Yes, that's confusing. I don't make the rules. The ending, yes, last line of the block quotation. Okay. And then after the block quotation, you're typically going to have some sort of analysis, wrap up, transition. That sentence should begin all the way over to the beginning of that line, so don't indent there unless you're starting a new paragraph. Okay. And I hope that's not cutting. If this is cutting anything off, let me know. So here's an example for APA as Johnson 2010, because it's APA explained, and then you have your block quotation. And Johnson further noted that. So you're continuing to comment on this quotation, and it's fairly simple once you get used to it. Just remember, more than about 4 lines, okay? And here's your MLA citation. You can see this is an example where there's an ellipsis because we removed some material. There's that period first, so we have 4 dots because that's a period. And when you have a block quotation that's more than 1 paragraph, you still have the paragraph break, but you can see it's all shifted over by about a ½ inch, okay? And then right here, the citation at the end. Okay, so sometimes you'll need to edit a quote using some of these marks. Ellipses I just talked about. You don't need to use an ellipses at the beginning or the end, only in the middle if you're taking something out. And remember that period, if there is an end of a sentence, you leave that period in. And then if you're going to make a change, so sometimes I'll italicize something to emphasize it. If there's something italicized that's important, sometimes you'll say emphasis in original or emphasis added if you have made that change to a quotation. Generally better to avoid making those changes, but sometimes there's a time and a place. And then generally speaking, if you need to put in a clarifying point or anything like that, remember that goes in brackets, okay? And oops, I'm almost going to run out of time. They only let me have 15 minutes of the free version of this app. So you can see here, there's a typo. We've got a sick right there to indicate that the typo is in the original. It's the same thing for APA, except the location is a little bit different. Here you've got it at the end of the sentence. In AP, it's right next to the error, okay? And we're going to maintain those errors. Even though they're wrong, it's in the original, so we're going to keep it, okay? I know that's a little funky. Here's some resources for you. Please reach out if you have any questions. All this stuff is meant to help you make your writing better, more professional, better, okay? And that's what we're here for. So good luck, write hard, and please take good care of yourselves, okay? I'll see you soon online. Alrighty.